Hi guys, today we are going to be reviewing our amendments for our U.S. History EOC STAR Test Review. On the test, you're going to need to remember a lot of the amendments we have studied this year. So we are going to start on slide 4, which has the blue bubbles on it. And these are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, also known as the Bill of Rights. Some of you are pretty familiar with some of these, and we're also going to highlight some of the Supreme Court cases that we have studied this year that involve these amendments. So let's start dragging and dropping. The first amendment is probably the one we are all most familiar with. That's our freedom of expressions. So this is freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, right to assembly. And we do have a court case for this one. So I'm going to make a text box right here. First Amendment. And the case to remember is Tinker v. Des Moines. So hopefully that name sounds familiar. This was a high school student, Mary Beth Tinker, who she and her friends wanted to protest the Vietnam conflict during the Cold War era. And so she and her friends wore the black armbands to school. And the school suspended them for violating school rules. And through appeal, they wound up at the Supreme Court saying their freedom of speech rights, their First Amendment rights, were being violated. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the students that yes, their freedom of speech was being violated and they should be allowed to wear those black armbands to school. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. Third Amendment is the quartering of soldiers. The Fourth Amendment protects from unreasonable search and seizures. Police can't just search your home or search your car without reason or suspicion. The Fifth Amendment is known as the Due Process Amendment. So these are your rights of an accused person. So the right to remain silent, the right to an attorney, the rights of the accused, anything as well as eminent domain. This is also where you can't incriminate yourself on the stand. So if you ever hear someone say, I plead the Fifth, that also involves the Fifth Amendment. Our Sixth Amendment is the right to a fair trial by a jury of your peers. And so we do have a court case that we studied this year that involves the Sixth Amendment. So let's add a text box for that. The Sixth Amendment. And the court case you need to know is Hernandez versus Texas. And in this court case, Hernandez was a man on trial for murder, but his jury was made up of only white men, and he was of Mexican American ethnicity. And so the Supreme Court ruled that his conviction was overturned because he had not had a trial by his peers. Seventh Amendment guarantees a right to a jury in civil cases. The Eighth Amendment protects from cruel and unusual punishments. And the 10th Amendment protects states' rights. Let's continue reviewing on the next screen with the red bubbles. The next amendments we're going to pick up with number 13. And the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments all go together. We're going to make a special text box for them. 13th, 14th, and 15th. These are the Reconstruction Amendments. Reconstruction, remember, is that time period right after the Civil War where the country was rebuilding. And these amendments have to do with the rights for the former slaves. And so the 13th Amendment is the abolition of slavery, ends slavery. The 14th Amendment grants citizenship to all former slaves, equal protection of the law for all citizens. And the 15th Amendment gave African American men the right to vote. It said you could not deny someone's right to vote by race. So if y'all remember, we kind of went over this in class this way. Free citizens vote. Free citizens vote. Those are the Reconstruction era amendments. The remaining amendments on this screen, 16 through 19, also all go together. They are the Progressive era amendments. Make a little box for them. If you remember the progressive era, the root word is progress. This is when, after the Gilded Age, when the power went back to the people. So keep those P's together. Progressive era, power to the people, where the government became responsive and started passing laws to make things better for the people of the United States. So with the 16th Amendment, that is income tax. So think about right about age 16 is when you can start working, and when you get your paycheck, they take out taxes on your paycheck. The 17th Amendment is the direct election of senators by the people. The 18th Amendment is the prohibition of alcohol. So 18th Amendment, you can't drink, and then we'll see which amendment says that you can. And then women's right to vote, that's the 19th Amendment. There are a couple of vocabulary terms that we need to highlight and tie in. Let's look at the 18th Amendment a little closer. If you think back to the Roaring Twenties, these are some of the vocabulary terms that went along with the prohibition of alcohol. We've got bootlegging, we've got speakeasies, those underground hidden clubs. We have the Volstead Act, which enforced prohibition. And then we have suffrage, the right to vote, because the right to vote was tied in with getting the women could get the prohibition of alcohol passed, even though they didn't have the right to vote. And then we have crime actually increased. They passed the prohibition of alcohol thinking that it would do away with a lot of society's problems, but it actually did the opposite and led to an increase in crime. We also are going to highlight the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. And we need to remember some of the women who fought and led that movement for women's suffrage. So names like Jane Addams, remember she did the settlement houses too, Susan B. Anthony, Ida B. Wells, Alice with an E, Alice Paul, and just remembering the terms suffrage and suffragettes. Suffrage being the right to vote itself, and then the suffragettes, the women who led that movement. So those are the amendments for this screen. All right, the last screen for amendments, we're going to go to the green bubbles and wrap things up. The 21st Amendment is the repeal or ending of prohibition. So 18th Amendment said you can't drink. 21 says you can. So if you think of the drinking ages, 21st Amendment says you can drink, and that's the legal drinking age. 22, that also, look for the number two terms. 22 is term limits for U.S. presidents. Up till the 22nd Amendment, it was just kind of tradition that presidents only served 2 terms. But this amendment is going to make it into law. And the 22nd Amendment was because of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Remember, he was elected to 4 terms in office. And so he is the one that, after him, that they limited presidential terms. It limits to 2 terms or 10 years. What that means is if maybe a president died in office or was assassinated and the vice president took over, halfway through the term, they were still eligible for 2 more terms. The 24th Amendment is going to ban poll taxes and help bring equality to voting rights. The 24th Amendment, we want to make sure that we note that it is part of the Civil Rights Act, or Civil Rights Movement, not part of the act itself, but part of the civil rights movement. This one a little bit bigger for you guys. And then obviously our last amendment is the 26th Amendment, and that is the one that lowers the voting age from 21 to 18. And let's make a note for that one as well. The 26th Amendment was prompted by the Vietnam conflict. At the draft age was 18, and so the slogan began, if you were old enough to serve, you were old enough to vote. Tuck him right there underneath. And those are the last of the amendments that we need to know for our STAR test.